Hi, Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Never get off the boat. Never get off the boat. Never get off the boat. We're going into the heart of darkness, all the way up the river. And remember, never get off the boat, Stacy.
Max, we've made it to the heart of darkness of up this river of money printing that has been going on for the past 20 years. We're at the end. We've arrived for Colonel Hertz. Powell has his acolytes around him, the Dennis Hopper character, the heads on, the skulls on spikes and all that stuff. And you can see that the madness that we, the Willard, or the Marlowe, in the case of the Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness character, that we've arrived into this heart of darkness, this madness. In these charts, Hertz filed for bankruptcy, so obviously, woo, the price soars. Another, looking at that same chart, the market summarized in one chart. Chapter 11 company Hertz is now worth more than before the bankruptcy. What cheap money can do, incredible.
Oh, yeah, Captain Willard going upriver into the heart of darkness, pursuing Colonel Hertz, who is, in this analogy, the central bank. He's gone rogue. His methods are unsound. He's surrounded by heads on stakes, as you mentioned, and weird artifacts and jungle creatures. And of course, that's the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve Bank. And Dennis Hopper is an acolyte. He's hopping up and down, talking about fractions, talking on fractions. What does that mean? I think you've got some thoughts about that. And Captain Willard would be Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is now made it to the gates of the central bank, and chaos, just like, of course, Apocalypse Now was a remake of Heart of Darkness, and it really reflects the chaos and insanity of the Vietnam War. America's Heart of Darkness, America's plunge into imperialistic insanity by spending billions to conquer really nothing of vital interest, but spending billions and trillions to get there. It's a repeat of the insanity, but on a much more epic scale.
Exterminate the brutes, of course, is anybody without any debt. The brutes are those without debt, and the Hertz in this situation and the empire is the empire of debt. Now, however, if you look at it with an Austrian eye, and Karl Manga says that all value is derived from human consciousness. So here you have that photojournalist played by Dennis Hopper. And Dennis Hopper, of course, a journalist there in the Vietnam War in that case, which had spilled over into the Cambodian border, is, the journalist is supposed to be a neutral observer, not become a participant in cheering on empire. But most of our journalists and most people do have huge piles of debt, do believe in the banking system and our central bank system. So they are the sort of Dennis Hopper character. So when Dennis Hopper says, it's very simple dialectics, right? 1 through 9, no maybes, no supposes, no fractions. You can't travel in space. You can't go into space, without with fractions. What are you going to land on? 1/4, 3/8? What are you going to do when you get from here to Venus or something? That's dialectic physics, okay? So here we have a situation that is not supposed to happen, that the millennials and Z are totally post-1971. They're all born from 1980. They've never known sound money. They've only known unsound money. So to them, we're ordinary people born before 1980, anybody born before 1980, before 1971, they know what sound is supposed to look like, right? And they arrive and they see the horror that is the Colonel Hertz and all his crazy village of and acolytes there. So to the millennial or Z buying on Robinhood, when they buy Hertz, which is a bankrupt company, it just filed for Chapter 11. And here's the way Bloomberg News, again, old school, pre-unsound money, pre-unsound methods, Hertz's possibly worthless stock soars in risky recovery bet. So there's this notion that we're in a V-shaped recovery and that also used car prices are soaring. So a lot of people on Robinhood jumped into it and started buying these shares, even though Chapter 11 shareholders get wiped out. So they're going to get nothing. But to them, in their human consciousness, surrounded by Hertz and all his free money, they're like, I'm landing on a fraction.
Right, the Dennis Hopper character obviously would be Rachel Maddow. But In an economy with a central bank that prices money at zero, then all fundamental analysis is out the window, right? Because all fundamental analysis of what a security should be worth, the school of Warren Buffett, comes from like a dividend discount model or future value versus current value, and it's all based around what the cost of money is, and particularly the 10-year Treasury bond. And you can do a regression model and figure out, well, this company like Hertz might be worth X, and this company Avis might be worth Y, and why should I invest in X versus Y? But when the price of money is zero, then all stocks become memes. Stocks are now memes. Hertz is not a company. It's not a stock. It is a meme, and it has zero value, and it's traded with fiat money that also has zero value, expressed as 0% interest rate. That's what that means. It has no value. And people on Robinhood who are accessing that app for free, again, no value, zero cost, it's free, so you can freely access that app with your free money that was given away freely by the government as part of the pandemic relief program to trade shares in a worthless company called Hertz that went up 100%. And this is what happens in an economy where the central bank, like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, has gone rogue. And you have to think about ways to right the boat here, which would mean getting Captain Willard to travel up the Fiat River and to terminate with extreme prejudice, which in this case means Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, gold, silver, balance sheets, earnings, anybody who had any experience with a sound money economy, the things that used to matter to a sound economy, a sound financial system, any of these metrics. So even somebody like Warren Buffett, who looks at balance sheets and he's a value investor. So for example, he dumped all his airline stocks at the bottom. They were bought by Robinhood appers. You know, the other side of the trade was the Robinhood appers. They're up 65%. Carl Icahn, another guy from probably the silent generation, perhaps boomer, he is, dumped his Hertz stock. He owned Hertz. He owned about 40% of it. He saw that they were going to declare bankruptcy, and he knows in the old system that we've had for thousands of years that equity holders lose everything. They lose all their equity. So he dumped everything. But this new generation who only know unsound money, only know Colonel Kurtz's way, this world makes sense to them. So they can land on a fraction. The Atlanta Fed just said the economy in the second quarter down 51%. Half of what it was, a fraction of what it was. And yet stock markets, NASDAQ just hit an all-time high. So for them, it makes perfect sense because they can land on a fraction.
Right. In fact, Robinhood or Cash App or other, now Schwab offers fractional shares of stocks. So they are in fact landing on fractional shares. You can buy a fraction of a share, and that's something relatively new. But to kind of extend the Apocalypse Now metaphor, so remember the scene in the movie where they go past an old colonial French aristocratic dinner party, and that's where Warren Buffett is. That's where Carl Icahn are. They're clinging on to the past,
yes.
And they're kind of like on the way into the heart of darkness. You would pass this old French colonial outpost, which would represent the Buffetts and the Carl Icahns of the world, as you head deeper into the psychosis that is Jay Powell and everyone who's come before him at the Fed.
And the exterminate with extreme prejudice moment is basically you have to end this insanity for this insanity in the financial world and geopolitical world and domestic world to end, because here even Bloomberg News, like I'm saying, it's old school finance, and they don't know how to, they're trying to say it very politely, like with a British stiff upper lip about these are possibly worthless stock, and they are. But who knows? They're saying maybe we're in a new world, and maybe, all value is subjective. And if they think, if these people buying these stocks want to keep it alive in their own separate parallel universe of a crazy village in the middle of this heart of darkness that we have created, that the Fed has created, that Bloomberg News has supported, maybe this is okay. They point out that, those positives aside of the fact that the economy might be recovering, it's only down half, instead of maybe 75%. So maybe that's better. And maybe there's a better market now for used cars. Those positives aside, Hertz's equity holders are still taking on significant risk. Shareholders rarely recover anything from companies that have filed for Chapter 11 because under U.S. bankruptcy code, all of the company's debts must be repaid in full before stockholders recover anything.
Well, you know, when I was a stockbroker in the 1980s, this type of situation in Hertz stock being traded would not have existed, for the simple reason that you would not have anyone making a market in Hertz stock because there would be no liquidity. There would be no counterparty. There would be no buyers and sellers because it's a bankrupt company. So why is Hertz stock even being traded in the year 2020? It's because the market maker, that function that allows market orders to happen, instantaneous buys and sells, and to be the intermediary, is funded with 0% money, and it's mostly done by robots and algorithms. So the fact that you've got a bunch of misinformed Robinhood traders putting in buy orders on what should be a delisted bankrupt companies doesn't change the fact that an algorithm sees the buy orders and dips into a pool of free fiat money to match those orders as part of the counterparty job of a market maker. And so it is now the beginning of a meme economy driven entirely by memes. A meme like Pepe the Frog was a meme that came out of 4chan, and it basically defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 because she was at that French aristocratic party in the middle of the jungle. She didn't understand that the world had changed.
And remember, Dennis Hopper's quote is about dialectics. So, you know, the definition of dialectics, the art of investigating or discussing the truth of opinions. So opinions are often wrong, but markets are always right. So in terms of this Hertz share price in the pink to collapsing, green is Robinhood app. You know, this is an app for Americans to buy stocks and cryptocurrencies and things like that. And they're pouring into it as it's going down. So is the market right? Or their opinions right? So it is the nature of this discussion is especially remarkably that the other side of these trades, including American Airlines is another one similar to this, is that the other side of this trade on the Robinhood app are the titans of our fiat world of investing. So it's a remarkable moment of a clash of contradictions. Dialectics look at contradictions within a society. And yes, I think most of the political class, most of the elite media class, and most of the elite investing class, like Warren Buffett, are in that French chateau, calmly eating, like with their butlers serving them in the middle of this chaos.
Right. When you strip out all fundamental analysis, what you're left with is gambling. It's just pure gambling, which is part of my model of the casino gulag, right? So we're all locked down in the gulag, and we're all on our Robinhood apps gambling. It's just pure gambling. Well, we got to go, but in the words of Kilgore, another character from Apocalypse Now, you know, someday this war's going to end. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Jeff Booth. He's an entrepreneur, tech leader, author of The Price of Tomorrow, Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. This book is getting huge traction everywhere. It's causing quite a stir. Jeff Booth, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Max.
All right, so let's just establish the basic premise here. So since the 1990s and the introduction of the internet and the introduction of the new network economy that relies on the digital economy, where the underlying asset, digitization, the cost is falling exponentially. The cost for storing, processing, and the bandwidth for this new economy, the price is always collapsing toward a price point called zero, that asymptotic curve. That's deflation. And you're pointing out that jobs are kind of being disintermediated out of existence. And you're also positing that the central bank, to make up the difference, is engaged in massive money printing. And the end result of all this will be an extreme society of overlords at the Fed and the central bank, and everyone else is basically unemployed. Is that a fair assessment, sir?
You pretty much nailed it, Max.
Okay, so the title of the book is The Key to an Abundant Future, right? So the abundance here would be the abundance of these free, an economy that's essentially free. What Kevin Kline wrote about in his book in 1995, the increased return economics. And so where do you take it from there? Take it from there, sir.
So you said it. We have massive declines in prices coming because of technology, and I can't see why that isn't a good thing. If you look at your phone, just about every app on it is free. You get more and more abundance all the time. My first phone cost $2,000. My first cell phone bill cost $1,200, and all it did is made phone calls. Now, if you think about the power that you have sitting in your phone, from a camera to a virtual assistant to everything, it's just all coming down at a crazy cost. You can buy it doesn't make you stop buying the newest phone either. It's not deflation like we used to see where people stopped purchasing. We line up at the Apple store for the new phone when we can buy last year's phone for $50 on a plan. And all of that is coming so that's one giant force driving into society that's making prices come down, and it's coming against another giant force, which is a money printing machine, which is just and those forces competing against each other are driving essentially asset prices up, and all of the secondary effects of anxiety, loss of hope. People in a rat race trying to work harder and harder to keep up with rising asset prices that are created in the first place by the central governments trying to stop deflation in the first place.
Right. Okay. So I think the forces that you lay out in the book, I mean, it's pretty well established now, and we can see a structural unemployment is now being part of the economy and almost a permanent underclass in the face of these tech overlords who are wielding this economic bully stick that is driven by their free kind of access to this new wave economy. But let me ask you this. The Pentagon just apparently released a study, and this was reported by The Intercept. It's called the Z-Bellion. The threat is that the Generation Z, those born after 1996, are on to the game. They've sussed it out. They figured it all out now, particularly how the Fed is connected to all this. And so they're buying Bitcoin, and Bitcoin being a hard money equivalent to gold and a way to have unconfiscatable, immutable wealth as a way to fight back. And this is kind of new in the popular culture is just getting wind of this, but this has been going on now for a few years. So Generation Z is going to war against the tech overlords. Do you see that happening? And what are their chances of winning?
Yeah, first of all, I see Bitcoin as a likely candidate, for a very likely candidate for a world reserve currency. So I see it as a really good chance of winning over time because it works on a network effect, and as it increases value, the currency is only trust in an obligation, right? So why do you trust the U.S. currency? It's not the face and zeros on the currency. You trust the obligation of the government to is that an exchange of value, and as governments do more and more to erode that exchange of value all over the world, something will emerge, and Bitcoin seems to be that one that's emerging as something that people trust more. And so currencies can go on for a long time like that, but when they break hard, and so loss of faith happens in an instant.
Would you say this is a ray of hope for Gen Z? In other words, they're on this Robinhood app, which is an easily accessible app. They can trade stocks. They can buy Bitcoin. They have really done something remarkable. While Warren Buffett was dumping his airline stocks and panic selling, these guys on Gen Z on Robin app have been buying. Same thing with Hertz. As Carl Icahn was puking out his Hertz stock at the low, Gen Z on Robin app was buying it up. These prices have doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Then they're rolling profits over into Bitcoin. Are they now masters of the game? Have they figured it out? You know, is this the new world order? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I hope so. But I would say this is a structural problem, right? And governments all over the world are creating actually more problem by trying to fight typical policy response with a structural problem that deflation is technological deflation is a good thing. I don't know why people are fighting so hard. That's actually the core reason I wrote the book, because isn't it good when prices fall? Isn't that what we want? And if prices were allowed to fall at the natural order of things, we wouldn't require the same amount of jobs, because the more they fall, the more people don't fall off from nothing and trying to pay for food and housing and education that's artificially inflated. So that's why I wrote the book. It seems insane to me to fight gravity, because there's no way central banks are going to win anyways.
Right. On that subject of, isn't it great if prices fall? Well, in our economy in America, it's on a fiat currency standard and a fractional reserve bank standard and a central bank backed standard. It's not on a gold standard. And in America, we have a capitalism based on the credit cycle, which is driven by boom and bust and driven by greed. So we want entrepreneurs to be really greedy, borrow lots of money, which we make cheap through the fiat currency system and fractional reserve system. And we like inflation for that very reason, so that we can create economic growth above a natural growth due to population and innovation, et cetera. We want to have, be the king of the world, and we need credit to do that. And gold is too limiting for us. So we have fiat money. So when you say, hey, prices going down is great, that's true, but it's not the American system. Unless we go back to gold, unless we go back to create Bitcoin as the standard, and we have sound money. As long as we have junk money, we're not going to have anything but this worshiping, this Keynesian worship of debt. All right, that's the American religion. So how do you change that?
So I completely agree with you, but inflation is just wealth transfer, full stop. And so that wealth transfer hits a certain class of people. And now that wealth transfer with greater and greater printing to stop deflation is actually just moving up the curve. It's moving up to more and more. So now middle class is caught in it. If you have assets and people are and you're winning. The billionaires just in the U.S. Just gained $565 billion since COVID started because of the printing. That is hitting society, and people are fed up. So it's going to break no matter what. And actually, we're causing it to break in a disorderly way. So you could have, if you backtracked 20 years ago, you could have let a system fail and gone through a recession and then back to growth again. Today, it's going to take a depression, and that depression is going to come either way. The depression is going to come now if U.S. said we're going to go to sound money and debt is going to be destroyed, or it's going to come through a currency crisis that creates hyperinflation and then sound money. But we're going through depression. We're going back to sound money no matter what.
So you being a tech giant, I think is fair to say, and co-founder of a multi-$100 billion behemoth of technology, you are a creature of Silicon Valley for sure. What do you tell your friends when you get together around the high-tech table and you say, hey, my name's Jeff Booth, and the reason why we're heading into problems is because of the central bank? Does that message carry in Silicon Valley, or do they look at you like, Jeff, you're crazy? What does the central bank have to do with anything?
I think anybody that understands would look at first principles, and a lot of tech entrepreneurs would look at first principles. They understand how deflationary tech is, how efficient tech makes things, and they understand how fast AI is moving into society. Artificial intelligence is moving into society. So most of the technological deflation is behind that we've been talking about so far, and all of the second order effects to society. We're looking at a point in time now, looking forward, because tech is exponential in nature. Looking forward, the amount of printing needs to double every 2 years. So the amount of debt creation, printing, what have you, globally, to try to keep us at even on that scale. So most of the tech entrepreneurs that I would talk to actually agree with me. They would say, this is happening, and what do we do about it? I wrote the book so we could start having the conversation about what we could do about it. Because it seemed like you, Max, Stacy, You've been talking about this for a long time. I've been talking about this for 10 years and watching these trends. And I just thought my kids are going to grow up in a different world than I grew up in, without any of the chances, without anything else, because we're going to go into revolution and war. If first principles aren't discussed in a debate how to transition to a better future.
Fair enough. Jeff Booth, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
All right, and that's going to do it for this episode of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Jeff Booth, the author of this book, The Price of Tomorrow. Check it out. It is really making waves out there. And if you'd like to get in touch with us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.